professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. David Dulio joins us on the Oakland County MegaCast. What a great time to have your job.
Looks like.
Sorry about that. Got it on mute, right? You'd think we'd all be experts at this Zoom thing by now, but I guess not. It is absolutely interesting. There's never a shortage of stuff to talk about.
If you're a political junkie, this is overload right now. Have you ever seen things? It seems like we're so divided. Is it that way, or is it just we have a 24-hour news cycle?
You know, it's both. But we've had the 24-hour news cycle for a long time. You know, it's been around since the dawn of cable news, and if not before. And it's certainly just been exacerbated with the internet. Social media really takes it to another level. But the polarization and division is certainly there on top of all that. And I think that they feed off of each other.
Your thoughts on the Democratic National Convention. Is the virtual convention working?
It's hard. You know, I think it's different than what we are used to seeing. It's different than what we're used to watching. And for those of us that do watch it, right? Because the numbers coming out of the first couple nights are that viewership is down significantly from 2016. And but I think the differences are both good and bad for both parties. We'll see what the Republicans come up with next week, but the Democrats, right? So far, well, let me start with the negatives. The one of the problems I think that comes along with a all virtual convention is simply that the pomp and circumstance is not there. Joe Biden is not going to come out on or after his speech on Thursday have balloons and confetti drop, right? It's going to be this Zoom call kind of thing, and the speakers don't have the crowd to feed off of, the applause and cheering that usually comes along with those things. And it reminds me of the out party's response to the president's State of the Union address every January. When we watch those, it's always harder on that individual who's given that speech. Gretchen Whitmer did it in January. You know, it was, it's usually to an empty room with no crowd and no applause and no cheering. And that's tough for the speaker. On the positive side, right, the parties have an opportunity to show very well produced, very video-friendly content that they're hoping will draw people in and get people to watch. But as I mentioned, that may not be working given the lower viewership numbers we're seeing.
David Dulio, professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, joining us on the Oakland County MegaCast. Were you surprised Governor Whitmer was not picked as Joe Biden's VP?
Not really. You know, I think after, in the wake of the protests we've seen around the country over George Floyd's death, you know, I think that there was increasing pressure on Vice President Biden to choose an African-American woman. I think that was something that you could see coming. And, you know, he had a number of very talented individuals that he could have selected from that would fit that category. Certainly, Governor Whitmer has been part of that conversation for months and months and months. And it was pretty evident, at least with some reporting in recent weeks, that she was right there on the list until the very end, having traveled to Delaware to meet with Joe Biden and talk about the opportunity that might have come her way.
You're listening to the Oakland County MegaCast on 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH in Bloomfield Hills. Professor, how important is the state of Michigan for this upcoming election? I know in the beginning they were saying we were going to be the battleground state, and it could rest with the state of Michigan. However, we're seeing Biden pull ahead in the polls. Do you think it's going to remain that way, or could this get closer as the election draws near?
Oh, I think it's going to be close, and I think Michigan is going to be a big deal in either candidate's coalition of states, coalition of electoral votes that will win them the presidency. And don't take my word for it. I would point you to two Democrats that have talked about how they think that the state's going to be close, and maybe not believing the polls that are out there. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, said as much a couple of weeks ago, and Governor Whitmer did more recently, saying, look, Michigan's going to be close.
David Dulio with us, professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. So continuing on talking about the elections, we saw record turnout in the state of Michigan in terms of absentee voting in the primary elections. Even greater turnout is expected in the general election for absent voters, as well as a record turnout for general voters in the November elections. That also brings up a number of key issues, including what's become a national issue regarding the U.S. Postal Service and their role in mail-in voting. Mail-in voting's been around in many states for many years. It's relatively new in Michigan on a wide-scale level, and many states, including the state of Michigan, joining in on a lawsuit against the Postal Service and particularly their leadership, and secretaries of state encouraging voters who are voting by absentee ballot to deliver their ballots directly to their clerks instead of using the U.S. mail. How big of an impact is absentee voting going to have on the 2020 general election?
Well, I think it's going to have a major impact, and we saw the huge increase in absentee ballots that were turned in for the Michigan primary on August 4th, as you mentioned, and that number is only going to grow. There were some concerns prior to primary day about were the clerks going to be able to count all those absentee ballots in a timely manner. That didn't seem to be too much of an issue. But when we get to the general and November 3rd and maybe days after, the sheer volume of votes is going to make those questions come up again. I think that an interesting thing for me is how absentee ballots make it harder on campaigns, because after those absentee ballots go out, a voter can turn one in or put it in the mailbox anytime between then and election day, and those are going to be out in voters' hands in mid-September. So rather than focusing their voter turnout efforts the last week or last weekend of the campaign, which is traditionally the time frame for GOTV work, now campaigns have to face 2 months of election days where they really have to be on their game in tracking voters who have requested an absentee ballot, identifying whether they are a supporter or not, and communicating with their supporters to get those ballots. And it makes it much more difficult for campaigns in terms of resources that they need to make contact with those voters and track who's turned in an absentee ballot and who hasn't.
Professor, I never thought I would see the U.S. Postal Service be the target of such a political mudslinging fight. Will the agency survive? And is this hype going into the election, or is there really a concern that this is a form of voter suppression?
Well, I think that there's a lot going on in this discussion, right? So let's talk about a few things that are known, right? I think it's a bad look for the Postmaster General when he is a Trump donor, right? To be making some changes that he says, have been in the works for a long time. That's fair. But as I said, it's a bad look for the link to be there. However, Postmaster General is not appointed by the president. Postmaster General is approved by the Board of Governors at the United States Postal Service. And that is a that board is made up of presidential appointees, both Republicans and Democrats. And he was approved unanimously when he took the job. So including with some Democratic support. So that's important. I think that there's concern over, will the mail get there on time? And that's a fair question. Your guess is as good as mine. I think that that's something to keep in mind. And if voters are going to vote absentee, get your ballots in early. But at the same time, right, it's tough because those ballots will go out and could be sent in very early on, as we said before, and with a long time to go in the campaigns. And something could happen, and if a voter has put their ballot in, they can't get it back and change their mind. In fact, the ballots are going to be out there, absentee ballots are going to be out there before the first presidential debate. And if somebody turns their ballot in and then watches the debate and says, well, I'm changing my mind, well, it's too late. One other thing too, I think that there's been some discussion about pictures of mailboxes being in the back of trucks, and folks have said, oh my gosh, there's the Trump administration, they're taking mailboxes away. Well, that's a long-standing practice at the post office. In fact, in the Obama administration, I think a time frame of 2009 to 2011, or it might be 11 to 14,000 post office boxes were taken off the streets in those same trucks. So that's not a Trump thing, right? That's something that the post office has done for years and years and years. And you can look that up in the Washington Post article from a few years back about that. So there's some things that need to be sorted out when we talk about these things.
It's so important to have people such as yourself with the knowledge. If you're a regular person and you're seeing this go on, it's being shared over social media, so people are taking all of these things as fact. How do you navigate the noise to get to the truth?
It's really hard, right? It's really difficult with the amount of information that can come at people and that can be imposed on us, right? And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. And I guess I would tell your listeners and viewers that they have to do their research, right? And if something seems fishy, it probably is. And you should look it up. And, of course, that takes time and effort. It takes time away from things that you might, other things you might like to be doing. But if you want to be an informed voter and an informed participant in your democratic society, right, you need to invest that time to get down to the truth.
David Dulio with us, professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Professor Dulio, just to circle back to the mail-in voting again, there's been a lot of concern. There's been a lot of concern with the increase in absentee voting in expected in this upcoming election due to the pandemic and due to new laws in states such as Michigan, that there's going to be an increase in voter fraud, as the term is known. Is that, from a political standpoint, the research that you're aware of and the information you're aware of, is voter fraud a legitimate problem or a significant problem, or is that political rhetoric and fodder from one side to undercut the other?
It's both. I mean, I think that, does voter fraud happen? Yes. Do people try to scam the system? Yes. Does it happen as much as President Trump talks about or threatens? Probably not. And I think we can look right at our Michigan primary from a few days ago, a couple weeks ago, actually. There were almost 900 ballots, absentee ballots, sent in that were from dead people, right? So that's almost 900 people trying, and that's from the Secretary of State reporting that data. Great Detroit News article on it. But that's almost 900 people that tried to scam the system. And did they get them all? I hope so. But but it happens. It's real, and people get thrown in jail for it. They get charged with it, and those are the only those are the ones that get caught. So it's something to be concerned about. But you used an interesting word there. Does it happen at a significant enough level? That I can't tell you.
Such interesting times that we are actually living through right now. Civic engagement, I think, is more important than ever before. Are you seeing people get more engaged because living through a pandemic, we're going through something that we've never gone through before, and we really need to rely on our elected leaders to help guide us through this troubling time?
Yeah, I think many in the public are clamoring for it, right? They're looking for an opportunity to engage in a way that is productive, right? And at the Center for Civic Engagement, what we want to do is have Oakland University be a convener of conversations. We want to be the place where conversations about issues of public importance can happen. But we want them to happen in the quote unquote right way, right? We want them to be civil and respectful. And because that's what's missing, frankly, right? And we want to be at the center, the antithesis of cable news, right? Where it's a bunch of yelling and screaming back and forth at each other. So, and we have a number of things coming up throughout the fall related to the election that will allow folks to do that. I would say to any listener or viewer out there, you can always get get information on our stuff through our Facebook page. We're at OUCCE.
Tell us a little bit about some of the things coming up. Are they going to be virtual? How's that going to work?
Yeah, as somebody who I certainly wish that we could gather people together in a physical space to talk about important issues, but given given where we're at with the pandemic, we can't. So we're going to do a series of virtual things throughout the fall, and one of them is a series of four events. I'm calling them office hours because they feature OU faculty experts on a variety of topics that are at the center of our discussions these days. Social protest, economy related to COVID-19, and we'll do an election preview and an election wrap-up throughout the fall. We're also going to do something. We're going to partner with Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from Michigan Radio and Detroit Public TV, their civility project. And I'm really excited about this one because Nolan and Stephen did this because they saw similar things that I've seen, which is that Americans who disagree with each other have a hard time talking to each other these days. And what the civility project does is allow Nolan and Stephen to talk about their political differences, but how they maintain a strong friendship. And it really gets at a couple of key features, I think, which is, look, we want to demonstrate to people that, just because they disagree politically, that doesn't mean the other person's the devil. And Nolan and Stephen do a great job of that through this program. It just allows us to demonstrate and model behavior for folks to give them an example of what they can accomplish with their own friends and family members when they disagree.
Yeah, Sunday dinner at a lot of tables haven't been quite so pleasant since all of this has started. And that goes into how do we have those conversations? Because you have some people, they're afraid to say anything. Right. Because it makes you, it's like no one can get out how they feel. And is that a big detriment to our society? Because if you can't have a conversation around a topic, then things don't change. Ideals don't change without those conversations.
Yeah, it's a huge problem because if we can't talk to each other, we can't solve problems as effectively, right? And I think that one of the big issues is that a lot of folks tend to start where they disagree. If we could start a conversation with things that we agree on, we'd probably be able to get to a solution a lot quicker, right? So it's about how those discussions take place and trying to find the best way forward, really.
We're talking to David Dulio. He's the professor of political science and director of the Center for Civic Engagement over at Oakland University. You have a lot of great things coming up for the fall. I know I'm going to be tuning into that. We have just a few more minutes with you before we let you go. Anything you want to touch on? I mean, we are about to go into a new school semester. What are you telling your students during all of this?
Well, OU starts classes the first week of September. So when I go into I'm going to be in the classroom. If we're allowed to do that, I'm going to be in person, and I'm happy to see that a number of my colleagues are going to do the same thing. And the last I looked, we had about 30% of our courses are going to be in person. And of course, that comes in the wake of Michigan State yesterday saying that they're going to go all online. I truly hope that we're able to have some in-person education this fall. But we're going to do it with all of the precautions that are necessary, masks in the classroom, social distancing. I have one of my classes this semester is going to is slated to be in a room that would hold 45 people, but we're only going to have 19 in there. So it's a way to keep people separated, masks on. There's going to be a great deal of testing that happens on campus with students that are slated to live in the residence halls. It's been really great to see the lengths to which the OU administration is going to keep students as well as faculty and staff safe on our campus.
Are you worried that some students are maybe turning away because remote learning is just not the same as in-class learning? And like so many of your subjects that you teach, it's about the dialogue, and you can't get that through Zoom all the time.
It is, and it's really difficult to, if not impossible, to recreate the dynamic that happens in a classroom with instructor and student having and heck, I would even say it's the more valuable discussion is student to student, right? There's a bunch of different ways that students can learn material. They can learn from me, they can learn from the books, but they can really also learn from the interaction between them. And without an ability to have that dynamic interaction take place, there is something that's lost.
David Dulio, we thank you so much for being with us. You know, you're always just like a wealth of knowledge about politics in general, about Michigan politics, but also so many other things going on in our society right now. So we appreciate the time with you this morning and you sharing your knowledge and your wisdom.